Hi, everyone. It's Amanda from AI for Education. We have quite a few people joining, so we're going to give everyone a little bit of time because it's one by one with Zoom. But we're so excited to have you here today. We have a great partnership with Educating All Learners Alliance, and we'll be diving into everything generative AI and special education. Really excited to have you here. We just are very excited, but we're going to give everyone just a couple of like a half a minute left before we get started. But just really appreciate you all being here, whether it's the middle of your day, if it's the evening, if you're taking some time away from the classroom. We just really appreciate you being here. And we only have our first hello, and this is from Budapest, so it will be a pretty diverse panel. Like, make sure that you're responding to everyone as well. We love to say Clayton, that's my mom. Hi, mom. Always very supportive. Also, New York City apartments where they buzz every door, so hopefully that will not keep happening. But very excited to have you here. We'll actually get started. So I want to take it over to Tria, who's going to share like why we're here today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tria Hutchings. I am the project director for the Educating All Learners Alliance. We call it ELAR for short sometimes, but we are a organization of 140 partners who are part of our alliance, each that are committed to supporting students with disabilities and learning differences. And we have partnerships from across the United States, from across sectors. So we're really excited to be here today and in partnership with AI for Education to bring you this series. We're hoping that this can answer some questions you might have and provide a basis for your AI and special education.
Amazing. And we just want to say thank you so much. This was an amazing opportunity for us to really dig into something we care a lot about here at AI for Education, which is a focus on diverse learners and equity. And I think that this is an amazing opportunity. We know from research that students with IEPs and 504 plans actually tend to use these technologies more because of the accommodations they allow. So I'm really excited to have you all here. As I said, I'm Amanda. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. We're already approaching 300 people watching, which is amazing. If you've been with us before or this is your first time, I want to set the scene. We want this to be interactive. The chat is your best friend. I want you to get involved. We've got some like myths and facts, and if you've been with me before, you might be familiar with that approach. But please use that Q&A function to engage with your peers. This is a community of practice, and we have 4 sessions together that are really amazing for us to be able to do together. So please get involved, say hello, and then I also want you to prompt with us. We'll be using ChatGPT today, so if you have a ChatGPT account, please feel free. We'll be sharing some prompts and we'll be doing some work together. And then lastly, if you have a great resource, please share. And I just want to say thank you again to Treya. I'm going to have you come off the video and we'll have her come back on at the end. But we're going to get started. We only have an hour together. And so just want to say first, thank you for everyone joining. We have a super diverse group of participants. So love having you here. And let's go. So first, I'm going to ask you to take out your phone. Okay, I actually have 2 phones. I have the one that is new and the one that I broke. And so this one has not been broken yet, so give me time. But what I want to start with is how we start every single introduction to generative AI, which is we have experience with AI every day. So we might be talking about ChatGPT and other tools, but we have AI in our pocket right now. And so while it might seem like, oh my gosh, how did this happen in the last year? We have had artificial intelligence around us for decades. And so for me, I have a nice handy dandy iPhone. It recognizes my face. And the way it does that is it creates a biometric signature of my face that actually changes every time I look at the technology. Because maybe, if I'm a guy, I'm doing Movember, I have a suspect mustache, or I'm wearing a hat, or slow lighting. And that's a form of artificial intelligence. It's going to be able to create essentially a signature in my face and then do an action, which is this case, it opens my phone. And so I want to say that AI is a part of our lives. In fact, 84% of us across the world use artificial intelligence every day. If you have one of these, or you have a laptop, which I'm assuming a lot of you are here from, then you have that already. So I'm going to ask, this is our first time, I'm going to ask for some feedback from the audience. What are some other common artificial intelligence apps you have on your phone right now? So what are some ways in which you interact with artificial intelligence? So Allison, Google Maps, Siri, your weather app, Waze, absolutely. So we have Copilot, your fingerprint lock. Absolutely. My computer has my fingerprint lock. So I'll go through a couple of these that are pretty common. So we have our maps. So this is an opportunity that if you're on a highway and there's a major set of construction, it can reroute you based on real-time data. It can also tell you like what's the best way to go, and or it's quite funny. Like, it'll say you have a meeting in, X amount of time, you need to leave before. So we have all kinds of artificial intelligence that's part of our maps. We've got things like predictive text, and that's why I can never say anything but duck when I'm having a bad day. It's going to allow us to complete sentences, to complete, do our wonderful, autocorrect and help us with spell check. We've got things like we talked about in the chat, like Snapchat or Instagram, or if you're a TikToker, who are my TikTokers in the participants? We have all kinds of opportunities where it learns about you. It learns about how you use these tools to be able to provide you recommendations on how to do this. And there are also all kinds of like predictive and analytical pieces that happen for our students with special with disabilities as well. We have lots of different tools that use machine learning. So a lot of tools within your classroom will also have machine learning right now. So thank you for playing along. We have a ton of great examples on our phone, and we're going to move forward and we're going to do a myths and facts. And so I know there are almost 400 of us here, so it's going to be fast. We're going to go fast. But if you believe that this is a myth, I want you to type an M in the chat. And if you believe it's a fact, I want you to type an F. If you're not sure, I can't see you, so it's okay. If I could see you, I'd ask you to do this. But I want you guys to engage as much as possible. So we're going to go first one. AI can think like humans. Is that a myth or a fact? Okay, I can already see we have mostly myths, but we definitely have some facts in there. So I'll give everyone just another 10 seconds to answer. Okay, so mostly myth. And what we have here is it actually is a myth. And this is the first thing. If I had you in a room, and I want you to say it out loud to yourselves, AI is not thinking, it is computing, it is predicting, it is probabilities. And so it is designed to make you think it is thinking, but it is not at this stage. We have not created Skynet or data from Star Trek. But what we have is these tools that are able to do human-like things. And so in this case, because ChatGPT is a conversational AI, it often feels like it is thinking. It has a personality, it says I, but reality is it is not thinking, it is computing. And we'll talk more about that in a section on the technology. But this is a really important idea for us to understand because it really is an underpinning of misconceptions. And it's not just for people in our room that we have together, but also students can also think that these tools are thinking, not computing. But the good news is they are computing, so we can learn how to use them to our advantage and also demystify this moment in time. And so next is we're going to go to AI is unbiased. What do we think? Oh, this is fast. So we have mostly myths. Love this group. I saw some people, familiar faces in the crowd as well. Okay, AI is going to be pretty biased. And so I love that you all know this because you're working as special educators or working around this world, and it's incredibly important. AI is trained on the internet, and the internet has never been called an unbiased place. We don't talk about, how the internet is a really balanced place for both sides of the aisle. It is actually a place that really exacerbates and highlights our existing biases. And I think this is really, really important to understand because not just generative AI systems, but all AI systems have shown bias. And so whether that is, for example, the work of Bolamani, Joy, who has done work around AI bias since 2018 on how facial recognition software does a much worse job of non-white, non-male faces. And that's a form of bias because the training data sets were primarily faces of white males. We also have a lot of bias that's implicit. We have the majority of the internet is in English. It is primarily global North. It is going to have pretty much every ism represented. And so it's really important for us to understand that because of the way these models are trained, there is like no way to necessarily get completely past bias at this moment. But there are opportunities to build less biased systems by creating better data sets, by doing better job of creating systems and training systems. So I think while right now, especially if you've ever used a text to image generator, you can see that if you ask for, a CEO, an image of a CEO, it primarily will be a white male. And and even if you give it some support, it's going to constantly do that because the data set says that. So very important for us to understand, especially when we're thinking about working with these systems. And Art says it will also be an older white male. Yeah, we definitely will go into a little bit more about bias. So that is an important component to understand. The next question is, AI detection tools are effective. Do we think this is a myth or a fact? Okay, see, this one's a little bit splitting the room just a bit. Okay, so what if I said, do you want them to be effective as educators? I think we would want it, we have a little bit of a difference where I wish I could tell you right now that these AI detectors are going to be reliable, but they aren't reliable at this stage. They have both false positives and false negatives. So false positives are going to be where it says AI has generated a text, but it has not. And then it also has false negatives where you have a pretty high proportion, up to 20% of AI generated work actually running right through these systems. So whether that's Turnitin, GPT-0, copy leaks, et cetera, they both have false positives and false negatives that they're open to sharing. And this is something that's really interesting. I have been in many rooms where I get to do this live, and I will tell you, I've had superintendents, I've had leaders and teachers where their students, their child has been accused of AI cheating. And so we think this is a really important distinction to make, why AI detection tools may do a good job of catching bad AI use and bad AI cheating. The same way that you probably are aware of that without using the detector. A student suddenly has a different tone or vocabulary, it's a pretty strong signal that that student did not complete that work. But it is something that there is no magic bullet, there are no X-ray glasses, there is no digital signature that allows for an AI detector to be fully reliable. And for example, in July of 2023, OpenAI had an AI detector about ChatGPT. And what they found is that it couldn't detect, the own company could not detect AI writing, and they actually closed the tool. So this is something where we say, please don't overly rely on these tools because they are not reliable. And then finally, we have this idea that there has been research that's shown that these tools can be biased against non-native English speakers. So we really want to be clear that this is not AI detection in terms of running it through an AI detector is not going to be something that we suggest you doing. And as Anna said, there are tools that are looking at proof of effort or proof of originality. We support those tools because those are looking at how students actually work the process over the product. Okay, next one. Everybody ready? AI development has reached its peak. What do we think? Fast, we're almost at 400 people. This one, primarily myths, a couple of facts in there. Okay, so love this group. And so the answer is absolutely not. And if you've heard me speak before, you probably heard me say that like right now, generative AI is the worst it has ever been. It's the worst it ever was yesterday and the worst it will ever be tomorrow. It is so new. We are in this world in which we are developing technology that does amazing things, and it is happening at an enormous rate of progress. And so we are at a very early stage of this AI development, especially around generative AI. So I don't know if anybody knows what or can guess what the number one use of ChatGPT is. Like, what do people use it for the most? And please do not say cheating on essays, even though I know you're thinking it. But what do we think that people are actually using for ChatGPT? So as an assistant, emails, planning trips, research. Yeah, a lot of these are great, and these are absolutely parts that they're using. But it actually is creating more technology. It's coding. The number one use case, up to 40% of some of these tools are used to actually code more technology. So what we're seeing is that not only is generative AI and AI getting better and faster, but it also is something in which we're seeing all technology is going faster, which is really, really interesting. And I had this quick, like this wonderful image, this graph from Coacher that looks at how AI development has gone and what we have. And so we have handwriting recognition and speech recognition have been something we've been trying to do since before the dot-com bubble. And so this is really interesting in the sense that we have, like, it took like almost 2 decades. It took a really, really long time for AI to develop in a way that we were meeting human parity, which is this line up here. But we see a piece around image recognition was much faster, and that's because it used humans to help train. If you ever did a CAPTCHA that drove you crazy, where you're trying to find all the like the wheels on a bus or something, that's an example of how we actually helped train an AI model to recognize images. But then we see some really interesting stuff happen between 2016 and now, where we see these really rapid development cycles. And so we see reading comprehension in like a year, language understanding, and all of these different pieces like common sense completion. And the reason being is that compute power increased significantly. And so we saw that like if you were going to fly from New York City, where I am right now, to London, it would take 8 hours. But if you look at the improvement of processing power between 2018 and 2020, that 8 hour trip would only take you 19 seconds. And that is before the release of GPT. And so this is something that's really like the engine of why we have this new technology happening so quickly. And we're going to continue to see it happen even more quickly. So next one. Last one, AI will replace many professions like doctors, lawyers, and teachers. What do we think? Mostly miss a couple of facts. What if I changed it to AI will change or transform many professions like doctors, lawyers, and teachers? There we go. I love it. Yes, we know this is happening very, very quickly. We know that is something that this is coming for, all kinds of jobs. We see heavy changes that are happening already and creative pursuits. We know what's happening here. We have over 400 people with us today as a great example of that. This is something that is fast changing the way that we work and interact with technology. And so we know that there are professions like doctors that already, like a radiologist, they're already technology that can not only read MRIs and X-rays at the same like diagnostic level of a doctor, but also do it a lot faster. So we see that there are some, professions that will be heavily augmented or changed. We see that lawyers are already using this for case brief and also teachers. We know that you're here today to learn more about this and you're probably using it already in your practice. And so at that note, I'm actually going to ask Amanda on my team, another Amanda who's amazing, who helped build this wonderful presentation. Can you drop in we have a really simple 4-question like poll, so to speak, to see where you are, who you are, et cetera. If you don't mind taking this right now, we'd love to know where you are in your own journey. But we are excited to be here to talk to you about how you can start to use these tools for your practice, whether you're using them all the time or you're just getting started. And so I think it says it needs permission. So we probably need to yeah, just everyone's get a second. I think Amanda, just make sure that you can share it live. So just give us a moment, but thank you for the feedback. And what we're going to do is while we're waiting on that, and hopefully it'll be fixed in a moment, is we're going to get started with using ChatGPT. And so I want everyone, I'm going to go over to my email. I'm going to go over here. This is what it should look like, and hopefully it's allowed here. And we'll definitely, okay, here we go. Here we go. Let's gonna get started. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to ChatGPT right now. Okay, thank you, Caitlin. It is working. We got it. Go team. Thank you, Amanda. So if you just take a moment and then I'm gonna have you come over here. So this is my ChatGPT, and I'm gonna take you on a little bit of a tour. I have both versions. I have 3.5, which is free, and I have 4, which is paid. And what we have here is we call this window, like you can see, I do a lot of these trainings. We call this a context window, and we'll talk about why we call that a window and a context window in a moment. But what I want everyone to do right now is you're going to put in this prompt. What are you, ChatGPT? So we're all going to do that together, and we're going to do our first lesson for today. So I've done this, and ooh, it's a long one. We've got 3 paragraphs. It's giving me a lot of information about what GPT is. It's been based on GPT-3, trained on vast amounts of data. You can interact with it a lot of different ways. Does everyone have the same answer? So like, do you have, okay, so Dana, thank you. Denaya, sorry, you do not. And if you know why this is, then you're on your way. This is because this is something called temperature. So the way that, like Sarah, yours is a little bit lazier than mine. Mine this is the longest I've ever seen it, and I've done this about 100 times. And the reason why we have this variance across 400 people is that ChatGPT is essentially an application that we interact with, right? But it has a model underneath it that's set to certain types of parameters. And one of them is called temperature. So the temperature of a model is going to be the level of variation or creativity. So for example, if we all got the same thing, that temperature or variation would be a 0. But because this is ChatGPT and it wants you to feel like it's creative and interesting, it's going to be a temperature of about 0.7, which means really highly creative, which is great for us because now we can ask it not just for 10 ideas for how we can support students with dyslexia on a reading assignment, but we can also ask it 50 times. We can keep asking it the same question and we will get a variation of answers. And that makes us a great brainstorming partner. Makes it super creative. It makes it something that is really like such a good opportunity to get in there and to start pushing your own thinking. But on the other end, it means that if you think that you'll get the same output, let's say you were doing this as a demo in front of a classroom or a staff room, it will be different. So you cannot rely on this tool having the same output, at least for ChatGPT. So it's just really important to think about this. There's a lot of heavy variation between the way you use this tool and the way that you can rely on it to be a reliable tool. So that's our first piece. And now I want everyone to do, I'm going to put this back up on the screen, but I'm also going to drop it into the channel. So I want you to drop this in to ChatGPT. And so I'm going to do as this as well, and we're going to try it out together. I'm going to start a new context window. I always like to start a new context window because the context window is going to have a certain level of memory, which means that it can remember me. This one, like GPT 3.5, about 16 pages of content, and it can remember our conversation and interact with my conversation within that amount of memory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plop this in and we're going to talk about it. And I hope everyone can see it. I'll make it a little bit bigger. So you've got create a lesson plan for a mixed ability class on the topic of fractions. Include activities for students with varying levels of understanding and those who require tactile learning experience. And we're going to do this right now. So that's called a prompt. So if you're brand new to this, I love it. We're so glad to have you here. But this is called a prompt. When I ask ChatGPT a question, I'm prompting it. Okay, so sorry, Chris, I won't let you copy from the chat. Maybe then follow along, or you can, it's not too long. So, or feel free to experiment if you want to do a slightly different one. But what we've done is we've actually now, with ChatGPT, it's identified where there would be a fraction level, looking at the context. It looks at 4th to 6th grade, so I didn't even have to give that context. It's got some objectives, some materials, including manipulatives, a duration. And so we've got lesson plan, we've got the introduction, hands-on exploration, fractions on a number line, guiding practice, closing, and assessment. And then there's some extensions. That's that mixed ability. So it's identified advanced students. It's identified additional hands-on support for students who need special support. And this is where I think it gets really, really interesting. So now I can say now add an extension for students that are dyslexic. We're going with that. And for students that get discouraged when trying something new. So I'm giving a couple different things. So mixed ability. So not just in terms of students with a disability, but also just like some of us get discouraged. And so here we go. So it's going to go now, and it's going to include around anxiety. And so it's going to have the same type of lesson. But now what we have is like some clear visual aids with minimal text. You've got a couple of different places in which it's been added. It talks about actually, having smart fonts and formats, specific support, and also just out with students, like actually maybe take a little bit of a break for mindfulness. And this is just an example. We're going to do a lot more in the rest of our time together to kind of dig into this. But what you'll notice is it's a pretty good start. I know that those of you in this room are experts, are you in whatever you're an expert in. And if you are an expert special education teacher, or you're an expert in all kinds of different ways, I think that this is going to be really, really interesting in the sense of we have this opportunity to start to play and use our expertise, but also use ChatGPT and other tools to extend and to do more with what we have. And so I think this is something that is really interesting for us to start with. So while this is like we're starting with this very basic prompt, we're going to come back and do some more prompt engineering and show what's possible. And I love that, Sarah, I love that you're getting excited about it, and that Kristen, that this is great. It can translate into languages, but it definitely is an English language. It's been trained on the English language. It depends on how you use it. You can use it. I would say that if you can interact with it with English and then have it translate, that tends to work better. But it can recognize over 100 languages. And so, for example, I did a session with a tribal college in Bismarck, North Dakota, and we were able to interact with ChatGPT in Lakota, which was amazing and something so cool. It wasn't amazing at it in terms of it got, some of the grammar wrong, but it was really cool to be able to access it in other languages. But it works best in English at this stage. So for Anne, you can't change the temperature of ChatGPT, but you can for other models. If you're building your own bot with something like Poe or others, you can change the temperature. And then, and I'll leave that one. We have some bad at math. We'll talk about that in a moment, but we're going to go over to like a tech talk. And so we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. We're going to talk a little bit about the technology in the sense that, why does it work the way we are? And I had a really great question already come in from Melinda about the idea of bias, is that these systems are not necessarily biased because they're thinking and they are biased engines, but they are biased because of the way that we train them. And we'll talk about why that happens right now. So thank you for the point of clarification. But artificial intelligence has been around. We've essentially, Socrates talked about thinking machines a long time ago, like 2000 years ago. And so we have this idea of artificial intelligence as a theory about creating machines that can think and act like humans. So you can think about robotics, you can think about this idea of actually creating, ChatGPT, this conversational AI. And then we have machine learning. And so that's the next subset down. And that's where we have something like predictive text, where it takes a whole bunch of data and then it's going to give us an output based on how we use it. So for example, if I ask Siri, what's the temperature, it'll be able to tell me the temperature outside. So it does one thing really, really well. What that was, though, is that it actually didn't, it wasn't that helpful in terms of it's very, very expensive. It takes a lot of time and effort and data to build machine learning models. And so, for example, a chatbot, but a system like Quill that looks at writing. They had 200 machine learning models to help with writing. So a model for checking punctuation, for spell check, for things like active and passive voice. And so these are all something that's going to be something that's important for us to understand, is that was pretty expensive. And when we think about technology, we're trying to create better technology, faster technology. And this is something in which we went to deep learning, because what do we want to do if we want to create technology that thinks like humans, is that we look at the brain. So we looked at the brain and then looked at that and created something called a neural network. And that's led to what we have today. So when we talk about today, we're talking about a form of artificial intelligence called generative AI. And what we just saw is a lesson plan that was created based on all of its training data and how I asked it a question. And so generative AI can create new text, audio, images, video, or code, and a lot of other things that are happening based on what it's been trained on and the way that we use it. So I'm going to ask everybody, if I ask you to complete the sentence, the sky is, what is the most common next word of the sky is? Blue. Okay, but what if I changed it? Now we're in the book, Chicken Little. What would the sky be doing in Chicken Little? Falling, absolutely. So that's another piece. We talked about temperature, which we'll talk about in a moment again, but also now we're talking about the way that we work. And so in the case of ChatGPT, it actually predicts the next word. So if in this case, the sky is, the most common next word is blue, but it can also be clear or usually, and that's based on the training data set, which we'll look at momentarily. So if we change to a book that's specific, is that we're looking at something that is going to be specific to like the training data set. And so that's how this works. And so if you're creating an image, instead of it being the next word, it predicts it's actually the next pixel. So it'll build it by pixels. And so in this case, we have now an example, and this is part of our free student curriculum. So if you love this and you're a big tech nerd, this is for you. We won't spend more than a couple minutes here, but this is how these work. So GPT is T is for transformer. And what we have here is you have a bunch of text from the internet. So in the case of 3.5, which you're going to use is text, it's text only. For the more expensive version is going to be text and images. And what happens is that comes into the transformer and it turns it into probabilities or relationships between words, like the sky is blue. That creates a model that then's checked by humans and then can say, because remember, these tools aren't thinking, so it has to be told what's appropriate or inappropriate. And what happens is, and that's also where temperature is set. So thank you so much to Dana for being my helper here. I love you, Dana. Amazing to have you involved. But that is the idea of like the level of variation that's set at the model. So how much variable, and they play around with that to be able to get to the right level of good interaction. And then it's fed back into the model and then it is released. And that's when we get to use it. One thing we have to understand though, is that when a model is released, it means that the training data set stops. So for example, if I go to ChatGPT right now, and you might already know this, if I ask it, how up to date is your training data? What I'm going to see is it's September 2021. It's actually, I think, September 2022 now. And if I go to GPT-4, it's different. So I'm going to say, are you sure? I'm pretty sure it's 2022. But what you can see is that if something has changed, no, it's what we have now is that if I ask it questions like, do you know if Travis, Kelsey, and Taylor, well, like I say, who is Travis? Do you know who I think it should be January 2022. So this is actually a great example of a hallucination. It's hallucinating or making up stuff about itself, which is crazy. So it's actually wrong, but it's very confident in its wrong answer. But if I ask it a question like who's dating Travis Kelsey, it would not be able to do that because the training data has stopped. So that's something that's really, really important. If you're in Ontario, I know we have some Ontario people here, you have new standards that came out after the training data set. So if I ask for a lesson plan, create a lesson plan for a class on fractions with Ontario standards. What it's going to do is it's going to give me Ontario. I know I spelled Kelsey wrong, Alexa. I know. It's like it'll get it. Like I'll show you as well. It's going to get it wrong again. But what we can see though is it has standards that are represented. Let's see. Actually, it didn't include Ontario learning standards. And there we go. These are going to be the old standards, not the new ones. And I'm going to ask it for Travis Kelsey. I'll spell it correctly now. Who is Travis Kelsey dating? It will also not know. But this is an example of why it's so important to understand how this technology works or doesn't work, because it does have knowledge cutoffs. And for Grace, if you're using ChatGPT 4, its knowledge cutoff is April 2023. So, but this is all what we're thinking about in terms of you have these models that work a specific way, and it's important for us to understand the capabilities and eliminate limitations. And this is something that's really, really important. These tools, like we said, this is the worst they've ever been and will be. And so they do have things where they have bias in the system. They also can have hallucinations or inaccuracies. So the way that we're going to do this, the best way we think to use generative AI is to think of it as a brainstorming partner. So if you are a special educator, you are so busy. Like I think that special educators have the hardest job in education, and I mean that very strongly. I taught special education when I taught. I was not a special education teacher, but I was in a high complexity school, and I will never forget how difficult it was to try to meet the needs of my students. And what's happened since I left the classroom is we have really ramped up the level of work we have to do. And love you. I love that if you're in the audience, I just want to say thank you for being here and all the work that you do and taking the time. And the fact that ELA is supporting this work, I think is just so amazing and important for us to be able to understand. And so just thank you for being here. You are superheroes. You're definitely a superhero for me. But what it is this can be a great way for you to have a brainstorming partner, to be able to get that level of like, okay, I need a whole bunch of great ideas. I need a whole bunch of activities to get my students involved. I want to be able to show them how to really get deep into some things that were previously very difficult, like going back to the idea of dyslexic students. You no longer have to type, you don't have to have it perfectly spelled. It will recognize the way that I type. And I can be a little bit more confident that I won't look like I don't know, or I'm dumb because I'm unable to do I'm unable to do things that we expect, like our non-dyslexic folks will expect us to be able to do. And there will be no judgment there. And I think this is so important. So this is a great way to have a brainstorming partner, and it's also something in which it really can save you time. And with good prompting, your creativity as educators and some resilience, meaning like you keep going, you can create some amazing things. And we're going to do in this series. So this is the first of a series. So what we're going to do is the next one, we're actually going to look much more deeply into planning before we move into IEP goals. And then we move in or the IEP process. And then finally, we're going to focus on working with students with disabilities. So this is just a really great way to think about this. And so like Jody's, like, this is a great way to build some differentiation, and we'll be focused on that as well. And so we're going to go into, so Katie and others, this will be recorded so you can share with your colleagues as well or watch it at a later date. So what we have is some ways in which generative AI will work really well right now. So we've got written communication, lesson planning, differentiating content, which is just asked, brainstorming, and also translations, like we said before, like Estonian. It's not going to be perfect, but it does a pretty good job where if you're an expert in that language or you have someone that you can use to take a check over, even maybe your student, you can do this and you can actually have some really amazing differentiated content. And so the last piece we're going to talk about that's really important, as we talked about it before, it is a silly name, y'all. Hallucinations is not a name I would have suggested. This is what technologists call when a model messes things up and is no longer accurate. So this is something that happens a lot. It can happen up to 20% of the time. And someone actually asked us about why it's so bad at math is because it's not actually doing math in traditional sense. If I ask for, a word count or to do basic calculations, if a tool is not using a calculator, it's actually not going to be able to do that. But it will say that it can. And so it can make up things like fake links to books or articles, YouTube videos. It can give you a date that's wrong. Like we saw, September 2021 is not the right training data set for ChatGPT. And so we have to be really, really careful that we're always double checking our work, that the human in the loop, that the expert that you are is going to be something in which it's really important. So that the hallucinations, we're looking at this, and at this stage, there are no models that have been able to fully eliminate a hallucination. Because it's kind of how it works. It's always making stuff up because it's not thinking. And so in the case of this, it is always thinking, it's always making stuff up, and then sometimes it's wrong and sometimes it's not. Okay, so we're gonna go back to what we need to do. We're gonna talk about privacy before we leave, but I'm gonna go back here. We're actually going to look at our prompt library, and we're gonna do a lot of this together, but I want to make sure that we're having an opportunity to I spelled that wrong, but here's our prompt library. And it's a great question. Hallucinations are because it's always making stuff up based on probabilities. And so based on the training data set, it's going to have different probabilities. But realistically, because it's not thinking, it doesn't actually know if something is wrong or right. So it often will, and it's also how it's been told to act. So for example, ChatGPT has a system prompt that says, don't say, I don't know. So it'll continue to answer, even if it's outside of its realm of ability. So I know that we're going to have some time for Q&A. So if you want to put some Q&A into the actual Q&A piece, yes, I will put that into the chat right now, Sarah. Thank you for identifying that for me. This is our prompt library, which is one of our favorite. It's actually what we launched the AI for Education with, was our prompt library. And if you've used it, I know I see some familiar faces here. If you used it before, we love having you. But this is an opportunity to start to maybe do some preparation work for our next time together next week. Our share, but we have all kinds of different types of prompts. And remember, a prompt is where we actually ask ChatGPT how to do this. And it makes a difference in how we approach it. So like the way we ask a question, because it's a technology, actually matters. So we have lesson planning, we have professional development. I've used it to help build some professional development that we do with you all. Social emotional learning, which I know is so uniquely important to special educators and that work with students with disabilities. And then we also have some special needs pieces. So we'll do a lot of this next week. And so you can see that we'll look at things like accommodations, we'll look at some planning pieces, and we'll do that together. But I always like to do in this session, I always like to do my favorite prompt in our first ever prompt, which was a rubric. And so if you know me, you know that I really dislike creating rubrics. And so this is the first prompt I ever used on ChatGPT ever. And thank you everyone for being so great and supporting each other in the chat. It's so good to see you guys helping each other out. And so we have here, oh, that's not right. That's just the URL. Okay, so what we have here is we have the way that our prompt library is set up is we have a prompt that you can change based on what you need. You have a prompt that you can just cut and paste. And then we have a couple ways in which you can, this one has 2 versions, and then some ways in which you can keep working with it. And so for this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change it up for us today, though. So we're setting the scene. We'll talk about that more next week, but you want to give it tell it what it is. The internet is huge, and that's a training data set. We always like to give it a specific role to take, and then very specific directions. And so our directions really, the more specific we can be, the better. So what I have here is a 5th grade class studying engineering and for the egg drop challenge. And we want to create that. And we're going to create just a standard rubric now. And so if you've never seen this before, wait for your socks to be officially blown off. It might take you 45 minutes to write a rubric. It's now taking you 10 seconds. And maybe it's not perfect. And we'll show you how to work with that more, where I can start to say, egg protection, presentation, collaboration, teamwork. So what I can do now is say change to a 4-point rubric, remove the teamwork aspect because it's individual, and create we'll start there. So we're just going to remove that. So we're going to redo this. And here we go. So it's changed it to a 4-point rubric, and it has removed it actually hasn't removed it. It just removed the teamwork component, which is super cool, right? So it kept the presentation and communication, but this is where it gets really great for differentiation. Now what I can do is create a checklist version of this rubric. So for my students that don't do well with charts like this, I can do that. So now I can create a differentiated version. The formatting will be a little bit wonky, so take it with a grain of salt. It's not going to be perfect yet, but I can also say now and create 3 guides to completing this activity. One for students that need visual support, one for students that need additional scaffolds for decision making, and one for students that are sight impaired. Okay, so this is where I think this is where it gets really interesting, is that now I can actually create 3 different guides. So I have a guide for students that need some visuals, have visual impairment. You've got ones around the guide for students needing additional support. But this is where it gets really, really fascinating for you all, is that differentiating for your students, especially if you are a special educator, it sometimes feels like a mountain, and you're on Everest and you're trying so hard to support your students and to meet their different goals. But what happens is you just don't have enough time. Or you just need that extra bit of support, or maybe you're just a little bit tired, right? Maybe it's just hard to get your head in that creative space that often has to happen. And so this is an example of how we can do this. And we'll talk about this much more in the later series, where we get deeper and deeper into how to use these tools and how to think about them in targeted ways to support your practice. But if you haven't been using these tools, this is a great opportunity. My challenge to you all between this week and next week, or if you're watching this on recording, is to try it out. Use our prompt library, or just try it out. Think of a piece that you really want to do more of, or you tend to have to put aside because you're just so busy, and be able to do this. And I love that we have so many great examples of what you can think about, whether using UDL, working backwards. There's a lot of great opportunities here. So we're gonna have some time for questions. So I have a couple of questions. If you have them, please put this into the Q&A, because it's hard for me to be able to follow the chat. So if you have specific questions that you'd like me to answer, please put them in the Q&A section, and then we'll do some answering, and we'll be able to talk about that together. But I have a couple of things I want to do before I let you guys go, which is, the first thing is we're going to look at why it's so important for us to be thoughtful about how we use these technologies. And one of them is because you are working with students that have protected bases, they're protected. We have student privacy data and personal information. we have a lot of information that should not be shared. And so I think this is just really, really important for us to understand that it's always important to be very, very cautious about what you share. And we'll be reiterating this in every single session, because while you might want to be able to build specific, IP goals or plans or accommodations for a specific student, these technologies are leaky. They can actually, if you're using ChatGPT or other technologies, that data can be used to train the system. It can be sent to multiple places through APIs. You just have to be very, very careful. And please never include any personally identifiable information about a student, a parent, or even a colleague or yourself with an AI tool. So we'll show you some examples of how to do this, of how to kind of get like redact and or to remove, but just very, very important that you're thinking about these, because your students are protected. Their data is protected, their privacy is protected, even though this technology could be really, really cool. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to question and answers. We'll spend the last 5 minutes to be able to answer a couple to tell you about next steps. And we're going to go to the questions. Please put some questions in. I know we have almost 400 people here. I'm sure we have a whole bunch of questions. And so Melinda, I think we talked about this a bit, about this idea of bias. So data, we can build better technology that is less biased. And actually right now, there are a ton of organizations that are working directly against that. So for example, if you use something like Bard or other tools, they actually put in their image generators, be diverse, and they're trying to work against that bias, but we need better training data sets. We need better systems. So it's just something to be aware of now, that these systems will replicate bias. And we just need to be aware of that being the case. Okay, thank you for that question, Melinda. We've got from Carol, this idea for lesson plans. Okay, so we're going to talk much more about that. The more specific you can be by even including standards, or in this case, school policies, cutting and pasting them in, or in the case of using something like a Claude or a paid version of ChatGPT, you can actually upload the actual policy and or the standards and interact with it that way. So you get really targeted lesson plans or accommodations. The more open we are to asking a question, the more open, the less information we give, the more generic the answer will be. Because remember, it's creating probabilities, and the more it's going to give you a generic answer unless you're very specific on what you ask. So thank you for that question, Carol. Next question. Oh man. So Naz has some deep hitting questions about disinformation. It is really interesting, everybody. Disinformation is something and misinformation and inaccurate data is something that's happening a lot. There are a couple of different ways. One is we have lawyers and doctors who have been fined or disbarred for essentially making up, using generative AI like Bard or ChatGPT to make up. They didn't mean to, but they asked it about building some case brief, and it was wrong. It was made up. Same thing with some academics. We've seen misinformation. There was a 1,200% increase of internet scams after the release of ChatGPT. We're seeing Joe Biden robocalling people, and it was not really Joe Biden. It was using an AI voice generator. So there's a huge focus in actually building a couple things. One is we need better systems that are built by the technologists and better safeguards and regulations. And so if you're in this room and you're a technologist, or you have a sightline to someone in the that can be some regulatory body, love the work you're doing. Hopefully this is something you're working on. But also we need to build critical literacy around how to be aware of how to not trust and be critical users of these technologies, because they can create things that are inaccurate. And in fact, they do it all the time. And also people are using it in ways that can be pretty damaging. So thank you, Nas. Always happy to talk about ethics, and we'll be doing that together as well. From anonymous attendee, love you, anonymous. We have other tools like ChatGPT over Bard and other platforms. we don't have a ton of time today, but I think what we'll do is we'll pull together a little bit of a guide that we can share with you all, potentially in either the second or third session, about how to compare these. ChatGPT, especially 4, is considered to be the best model on the market. It does cost anywhere between, 16 if you're buying it for the year to 25 if you're using it as a team a month. So it is not inexpensive. And I know that it's very hard to ask people to add an expense to your life. But it is known to be the best tool. You've got things like Claude, which can take almost like Harry Potter and answer questions about it. You can upload a document. I don't suggest uploading Harry Potter because it's copyright protected, but if you had your policies, you can do that. It's also a great writer. You don't have to remember all of this. We'll make sure that this is something that we bring up next time. Bard, which is now going to be called Gemini, it's actually connected to the internet and will be able to search, which is really great. So it actually can give you a little more comfort that it's going to be accurate. And then the final thing is something called Perplexity, which is it's a generative search engine where it's kind of like Google plus ChatGPT, and it's really cool together. And I think if Amanda or someone on my team, if you don't mind dropping a link to Perplexity and Claude, that would be great. And so those would be awesome to do. And also Bing, as what we see here, Bing also is up to date as well as connected to the internet. And then also, yeah, so great. We have a lot of sharing the chat too around image generators like DALL-E 3, Midjourney, and Microsoft Image Generator. So we're gonna run out of time. I think I have time for a couple more. So I'm gonna take a look and see. Dana, about using the tool for students who have difficulty with written expression, have troubles generating sentence starters. You can create, sentence starters and are a great way to build like worksheets, essentially differentiated worksheets that you can do. This is something that it's just really like, what do you want it to do, and try it out. Dana, I want you to go try and see if you can actually create a couple of differentiated pieces where maybe you create a couple of like sentence starters and then give some space where the student actually is scaffolded to creating their own. For Lisa, great question about oral data. So something called automatic speech recognition. If I have ChatGPT on my phone, I can talk to it and it can talk back to me, which is super cool. So we talk about accommodations. A lot of the different tools actually now have ASR. I know a lot of people that use this that are uncomfortable with text or are low vision. So that's a great way to do that. The iPhone app is amazing for that. So we're going to see more and more of multimodality being able to be part of these systems. So I'm going to go, we'll definitely be sending a recording. So Julie will do that tomorrow. Let's see. I think I have time for 2 more questions. Okay, for Amy, good question. Amy asked a question about personally identifiable information and what policies should we be doing. And so this is something that's really important. I think that we want to think of this as an extension of existing laws and pieces. And that what happens though is it feels so natural to put in like Johnny has X, right? Like, and maybe we give it some identifying information because it feels quite different the way we interact, and we want to give more information than we would normally. So what we suggest is really think of this as an extension of any technology. And same way that you would not, open up your grade book or your notes, anecdotal notes to any other technology, you would not want to do that with us. So we suggest really like extending your existing AUP or academic integrity, your acceptable use policies to include this so that people are just aware that this is another form of technology, even though you interact with it differently. So I think that we will definitely tackle more privacy. We'll do that again next week. For those that are wondering, privacy, safety, data is something that Ela and I share. We share a lot of focus on. And I'm actually going to ask Treya to come back on and we can talk about next steps. But this is something that's really great. There's so many great questions. I just want to say, for us to be able to have such a rich conversation at this early stage, our entire goal, we're building this series, which is great, as a partnership. So we're going to be able to do this work together to actually like like identify maybe some key areas that we can actually work on and incorporate. And so this is something where, if you have good ideas, we have a feedback form that we're going to put in the channel right now, Amanda, if you don't mind putting that in the channel. If you want cool things, if you want to know more, please complete that form. And I just want to talk about like how you can continue learning with us. So really quickly, we have our prompt library, which we shared. We've got a free 2-hour course, and we also have our newsletter. You get to hang out with us, which is super cool. And then I'm going to hand over to Treya about how you can keep in touch with ELA, who are why we are here today. So just everybody, got Jackie, Aurora, Aaron, everyone that has helped on the ELA team, just thank you so much. And just how can we keep involved with you all?
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks so much for such a great presentation. That was really fun to kick off this series, and stay tuned with us. But if you want to learn more about ELA or the Educating All Learners Alliance, we've got all kinds of great information on the screen. You can visit our website at educatingalllearners.org. You can send us an email if you've got a great resource. We've got a fantastic resource library that includes links out to AI for education, but we actually go beyond just AI and focus more specifically on supporting students with disabilities and inside the classroom. So lots of more generalized resources as well. And you can send us emails, visit our website. We're excited to welcome you into the Alliance.
That's so great. And thank you so much. I mean, we are so lucky to be able to do this work with everyone. And like, so what's coming up? Okay, I know I will tell you all, it's not as easy to run a webinar and answer 400 people's questions. So I know I missed some of your questions. So I apologize that we couldn't get to everything. I know there's still these really big questions that you have all, and we will make sure that we are getting you that time. And if you don't mind answering that feedback form, harder for you get you to do it after you leave here today, but I see 317 people left, so please give us that feedback. We will come back. We're going to focus the next session much more on planning. So we did a couple of prompts today, but more as an amuse-bouche. They're giving you a little bit of a taste. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going into the planning process specifically for working with students with disabilities as special educators. And so while this was a more general topic, because this is our introduction, today, we are going to be going much more deep into how to support you as special education technologists, teachers, leaders, all the things I know you are in the piece. So let's make sure that if you want to share this, we'll do that. We'll then move on to the IEP process. And then I'm really excited. The last session will be focused on working with students with disabilities. We'll be using some real examples of how to use things like Canva for students that are nonverbal. And so we'll be doing a lot of work on that, which is really exciting. We'll also be highlighting some great special educators as well. So we'll be introducing that. But I just want to say thank you to everyone that supported us today. My team, Amanda, has done an amazing job of getting these resources ready for you all. Dan, who's so helpful and on these everything. And I just want to say, wherever you are, I know some of you, it's late, go to bed. If it's the morning, good, we're excited to have you here. If you're going back to teach, you have our support. We're just so glad that you took a little bit of time with us today, and we look forward to having you join the next session. Thanks, everybody.